Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Tanisha Nungary, and I am the President and CEO of the African American Chamber of Commerce in Central Florida. Today's webinar is part 2 of our 3-part boot camp series sponsored by our Chamber trustee, Wells Fargo. Today, you will learn how businesses, through targeted reopening plans, workforce planning, and customer acquisition strategies, can reopen. Today's webinar is moderated by Ms. Candace Simmons, Vice President of Community Relations in Central Florida, leading community development efforts for the 11 counties in the region. Candace is a member of our advisory board for the African American Chamber of Commerce, and we're so happy to have her with us this morning as the moderator. Good morning, Candace, and welcome.
Good morning, Tanisha. Good morning to the African American Central Florida Chamber. Thank you so much for that amazing greeting. On behalf of Wells Fargo, we're so excited to be moving into, this is number 2 of our 3-part series around our Recover Bootcamp. And so today, Tanisha and her team at the Chamber have pulled together an incredible lineup of panelists that will talk to you all on how to recover your businesses through targeted reopening plans, workforce planning, and customer acquisition strategies. We have an amazing lineup. All 3 have some phenomenal best practices to share with you guys. And so I don't want to hold us any further. And so I want to introduce our very first speaker this morning, Dr. Hendricks. Dr. Hendricks has served as a medical director of Advent Health Central Care since 2004. He received his medical degree from Loma Linda University School of Medicine and has been in practice for more than 20 years. He specializes in family medicine. Welcome, Dr. Hendricks. Thank you for taking this time to be with us this morning. I do want to let each and every one of you know that if you have questions, please, as Dr. Hendricks is presenting, please share that in our question box, and we will make sure following his presentation, we will allow time to answer any questions that any of you guys have. So, Dr. Hendricks, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Candace. It's an honor and pleasure to be with you this morning. Just a quick sound check. Everything's working well. You can see me?
Yes, sir. All to go.
Excellent. All right. So our slides. Do I control the slides or do you control the slides?
The Chamber will be controlling the slides for you, Dr. Hendricks. So when you're ready to move to the next slide, just give Ms. Naja the prompt and she'll take care of it for you.
Excellent. All right, thank you. Well, I am the medical director of Central Care, and we've had the pleasure of working with a number of businesses over the last, 4 or 6 months. I'm losing track of time, as to help encourage the reopening, safe reopening of businesses. And so I thought we'd just review a little bit of the science behind why we recommend certain things to help mitigate the spread of COVID-19 to our employees, to our customers, clients, etc. So go ahead and go to the next slide. So first, want to just review our current state in Florida. This is a good graphic representation of where we've been and where we're going. So you'll see back in April, on the left there was our initial pandemic surge. Our hospitals were gearing up. We were preparing for the worst. We got through that. And then along came July, and the numbers during the summertime increased dramatically, and then finally started to drop off. But now we're starting to see that wintertime increase, and we totally expected to see more cases in the wintertime, that we'd be in yet another wave, surge, whatever you want to call it, spike, uptick. I've heard many different words to use this pandemic, but we are seeing more cases, and we're already there, but we're not seeing the type of cases and volumes that we're seeing in the Midwest. But we are seeing that increase in wintertime surge. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So how does COVID-19 spread? It spreads mainly from person to person by coughs and sneezes. And those droplets are spread when a cough, sneeze, or even loud talking, or even just gentle talking can have those vapors that contain virus, and that lands on the nose and mouth of somebody near them. That's the respiratory transmission. It's primarily how we think that this is being transmitted or know it's being transmitted. Another way would be by touching contaminated surfaces. You touch your eyes or nose and can transmit it that way. So that's why we wash hands. Hand hygiene is important. But the main way is this respiratory transmission. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. All right, so here's a graphic demonstration of just the large and small droplets that we cough, sneeze, or even talk. Those respiratory droplets, water vapors that are carried quickly to the ground by gravity. But then you have these droplet nuclei that can persist in the air and go beyond that 6 feet. So this is where some of the science is right now, is how much is airborne and goes beyond that 6 feet, that standard 6 feet when we talk about social distancing. This is exactly why, because the majority of droplets are going to fall to the ground within that 6 feet. And that's we've known this about respiratory viruses for years, but droplet nuclei becomes an issue and suspending out beyond that 6 feet. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. Go ahead and the next slide. All right, what are the symptoms of COVID-19? Here's a list of all the symptoms. I highlight fever because the majority of people that are ill with COVID-19 will have a fever. Cough, fatigue, sore throat, shortness of breath, headache, chest pain, nausea, vomiting. These are all features and can be very confusing as we get into flu season. People have fevers with influenza and can be very similar to COVID-19. So that could be a problem as we get into cold and flu season. Upper respiratory viruses can look like COVID-19. So the key is testing and identifying those people quickly. Also, I'm sure we've all heard about the loss of smell or taste. Unusual rashes, conjunctivitis. There's some more rare symptoms, but just remember, if you're sick, you feel like you got a cold, it could be COVID-19. You need to get that checked out. All right, next slide. What is the incubation period of COVID-19? It is 14 days. So after exposure, this graph shows how many people develop symptoms in that period of time between 0 and 21 days. The majority of people will develop symptoms within 14 days. The average is 5.2 days. This is early information from the pandemic. So this graph is fairly old, but it's held up. We know that most people will after exposure will get sick within that 5 to 6 days, but it could take up to 14 days. That is why we recommend people stay at home if they've had an exposure and isolate, quarantine for that full 14 days. It still holds up. It hasn't changed. If you've had a significant exposure, if you're a family member, coworker, and you've had a high risk exposure, you need to stay home for that 14 days. Getting a test early can help identify if you've had transmission, but it doesn't get you out of the full 14 days of quarantine. Pre-symptomatic spread and asymptomatic spread are issues. You've heard about people that can transmit and not have symptoms. Before 48 hours before you get sick, you can be spreading it to your family unknowingly. Or you could be one of those asymptomatic people. You may never get symptoms, never know you have it, and be spreading it to your friends and families. So what's the solution? Wearing face masks, all right? That is how we prevent that asymptomatic and pre-symptomatic spread. Go ahead to the next slide. All right, so for businesses, how do we keep people safe? This is my first line of defense slide. Temperature checks at the door is one way. Another way would be having symptom checks where they can verify before they come to work. I have no symptoms, sign something, or just ask them the question at the door. Have you had any symptoms? Or they could check their temperatures at home before they go to work. But the important thing is making sure they understand that you got to stay home if you're sick. There's no powering through it. We got to make sure that nobody is at work with any type of illness. The stay home at sick policies are important, and return to work once they've been cleared by a physician or provider to return to work. So keep those sick people out of work as the first line of defense. Let's go to this next slide. preventing the asymptomatic spread is your second line of defense. So people come to work, they don't know they're sick, they're not having any symptoms. And I've graphically, again, represented how those barriers can prevent the droplet transmission. You'll see the plexiglass screens up everywhere. And I think that's great. The more plexiglass, the better. To prevent that type of transmission. But you'll notice I've added to the top there those airborne transmission that possibly could get beyond that screen or be suspended in the air beyond that 6 feet. And the solution to that is wearing a face mask. So preventing that transmission in the workplace is requiring everybody to wear a face mask unless they're in their office with the door closed by themselves. Meetings that are socially distanced, good hand hygiene, cleaning and sanitation procedures for your people that are housekeeping that are cleaning after at the end of the day, and frequently during the daytime, wiping down those doorknobs, etc., and maintaining social distancing, physical barriers, and ventilation. So I'll get into that in more detail. I have some tips and for employers at the end of the presentation. So go ahead and hit the next slide. Just a quick review of the types of face masks that are out there. N95s are those respirators that we use at the hospital in high-risk situations to prevent that airborne transmission. So people that are exposed to a lot of COVID patients should be wearing an N95 respirator. These are not necessary for community use or even in businesses. The surgical masks are adequate, and in fact, our standard at CentraCare right now is our employees wear surgical masks. They do not wear the N95 respirators because these are low risk situations. Unless they're doing a procedure that might cause aerosolization, then they wear the N95. But generally, their face surgical masks are fine, or cloth masks that are at least 2 layers of a tight knit cotton, like a t-shirt type material, is adequate. Those neck gaiters are, I'm not a big fan of those, and I think the evidence shows that they do present a risk because a neck gaiter is just that single layer. It's not enough to protect against transmission. So really want to make sure your employees are safe when they're wearing their masks at work. Next slide. All right, so there's a lot of information here, and I should have called this, instead of key concepts, these are tips and learnings I've had in talking to many employers over the last 3 or 4 months. They call, they want to talk about, they've had an exposure, they've had a situation, et cetera. So I want to make sure that all employers have a very firm stay at home if sick policy. We want to make sure those people stay home. And then when they return to work, the best thing to do, instead of trying to figure out if they're safe to come back to work yourself, is requiring a note that they're okay to come back to work. And we do not require a test to say that they're okay to go back to work. And I still see people coming into CentraCare from employers that their employer won't let them come back to work unless they have a negative test. That is not necessary. We are sending our hospital employees, our nurses, back in to see fragile patients as long as it's been 10 days after their onset of symptoms. They're feeling better, all symptoms are resolving, and the fever's over, because we know at that 10th day there's no risk of transmission. So we've stopped testing people to return them back to work in our healthcare setting. Employers should do the same. It's a waste of a test to require that to come back to work. I know mentally it seems like the right thing to do, but it does waste testing. Encourage your employees to get a flu shot. It's still early in the flu season. I was just on our Facebook Live this morning with Advent Health, talking about preparing for the holidays, and I did say that we have seen an uptick in flu cases last week at CentraCare. The previous week we saw 15 positive flu. This last week we saw 30. So we're seeing more, nowhere near the numbers that we were seeing this time last year going into the holidays, but the flu is out there. And if people can get their flu shot, be less likely to call out sick because of flu symptoms, and it'll help them to identify, if I got somebody with a fever, do they have the flu or they have COVID-19? I have fewer of those people to worry about if we prevent the flu from transmitting in our community. All right, the next item down, maintain privacy of employee health information. I can't tell you how often I hear this, and I just remind people, look, if Joe in accounting tells you he has COVID-19, you don't announce to everybody in the business saying, hey, if anybody's had contact with Joe, let me know, or you need to stay home. The proper way to do a contact investigation is ask Joe in accounting who he was with in the last 48 hours prior to the onset of symptoms, and then contact those people and tell them they may have been exposed and they need to quarantine at home for the next 14 days. Another way to do that is to contact your local health department, and the epidemiologists and the teams that are doing contact tracing at the health department are doing remarkable work in this pandemic, and they can help guide you through what do you need to do with your business. And I like to say contact the health department, because let them be the bad guys. You know, if they want to shut down a sector, or if they need to send people home, hey, look, it's the health department. It's not us telling you that, so it doesn't look like you're, pointing out or picking on them because they're sick. So get the health department involved if you have any questions about a potential outbreak at work. But remember to maintain that employee's privacy if they do divulge information about their illness to you. Let's see, what else I got down here? Oh yeah, all right, so I already talked about getting the health department to help you with that. And then here's another thing I hear often is, hey doc, we've got an employee that we heard went home because they were feeling sick and they're getting a COVID test. We're gonna shut down our business until we get that result. I would recommend that you first get confirmation of that employee's illness before you do anything. Don't panic. Take a breath, wait until you get confirmation, because there are many other viruses can make people sick this time of year, including flu. So you don't want to be too quick on the trigger on that one, and then sending people home, etc. Wait until you get confirmation of their COVID test, and then you still have time to act if you need to in terms of sending other people home. Another situation I hear is that an employee's spouse is sick. So somebody that's never been in the workplace, so a spouse or a family member of an employee is positive, and now your employee is being quarantined. Well, what about those people it came into contact with? And a friend of a friend of a friend is not a risk of transmission. This is a secondary contact. The risk of transmission is minimal. Now, if your employee calls and says, okay, I did test positive, now you have to step back with the co-workers and determine who needs to be quarantined at that point. So 2 points that I hear commonly again is, what do we do if somebody's sick? Well, have them go get tested. Wait until you get confirmation of the results. And the second thing is what do you do with a family member of an employee that's sick? Wait until the employee tells you that they've tested positive, if they do. The risk of transmission within families is 30 to 50%. So pretty good odds they're going to end up getting sick, but you don't want to act on that until you have confirmation. Let's see. Oh, and then requiring face mask at work. I think I've said that before. I will continue to say that. Your employees must wear a face mask if they express that they have a medical issue, etc. Make sure you try to accommodate the best you can under the ADA, but this is the public health and this is the safety of your employees. Perhaps they can work in a different area and work remotely, etc. if they cannot manage this face mask. It's exceedingly unlikely. There is no truth to the fact that carbon dioxide is a poison or hurts you and blah, 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 and all the stuff you see on the internet. Trust me, I've worn one of these 8 to 12 hours a day for years. We have nurses wearing them. There's no hazards to the human body to wear a face mask. And then lastly, remind you that the majority of transmissions that we see in the workplace, when I talk to patients that say I was exposed to a coworker and their test was positive, was either socializing with that coworker after work or during lunch breaks. When they take off their mask, they lower their protection, they lower those, they become more relaxed, and they're sitting there having lunch together, not thinking about it. So, this is a issue with us early on in the pandemic. Even in our own hospital, we were having employees that would take their lunch break, take off their mask, eat, but then we would see transmission that way. So we had to get very firm about staggering lunches and making sure everybody is aware. Don't let down your guard during your lunch breaks. So I think that's my last slide. There we go. I think I'm way ahead too. So open it up to questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Hendricks. I took great notes for myself as well. So let me go right into our questions. Feel free as we read these out and we get Dr. Hendricks' perspectives. If there's anything that you have, type away. So the first question, Dr. Hendricks, is will using two surgical masks increase effectivity? effectiveness?
No. I only wear one mask, and when I'm seeing patients, I'm just wearing one surgical mask. These are adequate for protection and filtering. The problem with wearing two is you may actually be affecting the function of the other, scrunching them up, causing a gap. So I say use them as indicated. One mask is adequate. I have had some employees that the mask bothers their face, they develop a rash, so we'll let them wear a cloth mask and then the surgical mask over the top. But again, this is healthcare. We require the surgical mask. 2 layers of cotton in the typical non-healthcare workplace, a cotton mask is adequate.
Awesome, thank you. And to just build off of that question, Dr. Hendricks, you talked about the difference in the mask, the N95 versus just using your typical surgical mask. What about the designer mask? Like, I mean, I love the creativity that COVID has caused, and I've been guilty of it where, I want my mask to, kind of go with my outfit for the day. And so, you go to these websites and you order all of these designer masks, if you will. How do we ensure, though, what they're making those masks out of is still effective?
As long as they're cloth and 2 layers of cloth, they should be more than adequate. So, I mean, the main thing is about being a cloth mask that's covering the nose and mouth. A better mask would be the surgical mask, but our goal is twofold. One is to prevent you from unknowingly spreading the virus to people around you because you don't know. I could have the virus right now, and as I'm talking loudly, if there are people in the room next to me, they could be at risk of me transmitting. The second line of defense there would be them wearing their mask to prevent that transmission. So it's twofold, and I really like to emphasize that wearing a mask shows that you care about the people around you. Okay, it's not just about your own protection. Oh, I don't need to worry about this. Well, we need to protect people around you because it's what we call source control. You're being the source of the infection, so you don't know it. So wearing a mask will prevent that. A cloth mask, any type of face covering that is at least that 2 layers of cloth, you're fine with. And my wife has a designer mask too. And we were getting ready to go in the store, and I left my mask at home, and she said, "Oh, I've got one of these." And I said, "No, I'm not wearing the floral print mask." And she gave me a hard time about that, but I managed to find a mask in the glove box, my emergency mask. So didn't wear the floral mask, but I'm not that proud to I would wear it if that's all I had.
If you had to, right?
Now, a very pretty pink mask.
Yeah. And so another follow-up question to some of your lines of defense, you talked about ventilation. Is there something specifically a business needs to do to ensure they have proper ventilation to combat COVID-19?
That's a big topic, and there was an asterisk beside that because there's more research coming out about airflow. So if we're talking about a virus that is potentially airborne, again, beyond that 6 feet, the best way to prevent that is by face mask, but also assuring that you get good ventilation. So newer buildings usually will have adequate ventilation and turnover in air. So you want, for instance, a room, your air conditioner, air handler, to turn that air over at least 2 or 3 times an hour. Now, some older buildings, some older systems don't come anywhere near that. Our hospital, I'm told, I think they said 12 or 13 times an hour the air is turned over. So, our newer hospital have very good air turnover, and newer buildings will. So talk to your air conditioning, air handling specialist about how often is this turning over the air? Can you increase the amount of fresh air that's being brought in? So bringing in more fresh air into the ventilation system will help to, again, get more fresh air and reduce the virus floating around. And then lastly, a MERV 13 filter or better. So MERV 13, MERV, is that number that you look for in terms of filtration. There are a lot of different devices out there. There's ultraviolet treatment of air. There's a plasma type of treatment that helps to neutralize particles flying through the air. There's all kinds of fancy things you can spend your money on, but the cheapest is cheapest and most effective is making sure your employees wear a face mask and open a window. Get fresh air moving across. Yeah, and for instance, we're planning our Thanksgiving this next week with my in-laws who live across town. So we're going to be merging our two family bubbles, our households, and the in-laws are older and vulnerable. So we'll be having Thanksgiving on our porch. So we'll be outdoors wearing our mask, but then when we're eating, we'll be taking off our mask and still keeping to opposite sides of the table. But that outdoors, if you can have activities, have meetings, or do things more where there's fresh air, you can again reduce your risk.
Your risk, yeah. And I love that great best practice for the holidays, because we all, we're a week away from Thanksgiving. So how do you maneuver that and still get that quality time with your parents and with your family? What about for children? So one of the questions are around children wearing masks. Is that something that is still highly recommended, or is it,
Yes.
optional?
If they're 2 years or older, they should wear a mask. And people will say, well, my 3-year-old will fight with it, whatever. Like, you can work with them on the mask, make it fun, make the Spider-Man mask, that type of thing, and put it on the bear, get them used to their favorite toy. So there's different ways you can get them used to wearing the mask, face mask. So there's no reason that the 2-year-old and older can't wear a mask. So how do we protect the under 2-year-old? By making sure everybody around them is wearing a mask. So those fragile infants and young children that can't wear a mask, we just make sure that everybody in that in the vicinity has that mask on. So yes, children can be difficult, but they also can be transmitters of the virus. Children and young adults are probably more likely to have an asymptomatic infection and not know it. They're coming back from school or college, whatever, and they feel fine, but they may be positive, and next thing you know, a member of the family's sick, and that's how we figure out that came from that from the student or school. A lot of conversation about under the age of 10. We're not seeing as many infections, but it was interesting that there was a report in the out of the CDC earlier this month looking at family transmission, and that there was 50% risk of transmission within a family if a family member had COVID-19. Odds were about 50% that somebody else in the family would get it, even if it was a young child under the age of 12. It was still a 50% chance of transmitting. So kids can get it, and kids can transmit it just as easily as adults.
Right. And you talked about Dr. Hendricks for Thanksgiving, for example, sitting outside on the porch, or can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. There's a little delay there.
Can you hear me, Dr. Hendricks? Okay, perfect. Got it. So you talked about going outside. Is it required to wear a mask? Because I see some of my neighbors walking in the neighborhood and they'll have a mask, but then there'll be others that walk and don't. So when you're outside, is it required to keep that mask on while you're in fresh air as well?
Well, it depends on your density. If you're not going to encounter anybody walking, and to be honest with you, I walk my dogs at 5:30 in the morning, and my wife and I were out walking the dogs. Neither of us had our mask on because, trust me, nobody else in our neighborhood was out at 5:30. I think I saw a guy way down at the end walking. So if you're unlikely to encounter other people, or if you do and you're not wearing your mask, just cross the other side of the road and give yourselves wide berth, because again, it's about contact, it's about density, and if you're outdoors and maintaining that social distancing, briefly, you're fine. Now, if I go down the street to the nursery to buy some plants, which I did this last weekend, I was complaining to my daughter as we're loading plants up, just the sweat and the humidity and wearing a mask. I'm like, this is really disgusting. But we were in a higher density of people. We were in a business. So, we wanted to make sure we were wearing our mask, even though we were outdoors.
Got it. Makes sense. Another question: how effective is Lysol spray disinfectant in confined spaces?
I can't convince my nurses to quit spraying rooms when they're done. They think that that's going to neutralize whatever's in the air, and I'm like, it doesn't really work that way, but it makes you feel better, sure. And personally, I hope there's nobody from the Lysol company. I can't stand the smell of Lysol. But that spray, if you can spray it on surfaces, it's by contact. And in a room, any virus particles are going to drop immediately. So yeah, if you want to, but I don't know there's good science to support that. I'll put it that way.
Got it. And one of the tips that you shared was around first line of defense is temperature checks and checking your employees when they come into work, or requiring them to do a checklist that say, hey, I don't have any of these symptoms. But we're also starting to see businesses use that first line of defense with their customers. I've gone into establishments that, they want to check your temperature before you come in. How does a business decide if they need to go that extra mile with not only checking their employees, but their customers as well?
That is a individual decision by the business. So you'd have to look at the cost of having personnel to do that, and the time and effort, making sure you maintain that these are private. We're not writing down your name and your temperature and that type of thing. Even for your employees, there's no need for a log or writing down their temperatures that day. If you do decide to do that, you've got to keep that information private, and because it is medical information. But our teams at Centric Air are manning the temperature checks at our attractions, many of our attractions. Going into an amusement park, you're going to get your temperature check. So that's an example of one business that's doing that. How often do they detect people with elevated temperatures? Well, it happens, and then they have to have the person set in the shade to let their temperature cool down, because oftentimes it's just because they've been in the sun. So you have to understand what the next step is. What are you going to do if that temperature is elevated? Are you going to say no? Are they allowed in if they come back and they recheck after 10 minutes and their temperature is normal? So there's several things to consider. Personally, your odds of actually stopping somebody that is actively sick with a fever from going into your business or to your workplace is pretty low. But the beauty of doing temperature checks is it reinforces, don't come to work if you're sick. We're serious about this, being visible with wiping down. I love it when I walk into any supermarket and I see them wiping down the baskets, and that, oh no, don't grab that. Grab one of these, and because I'm always grabbing wherever, and they're like telling, nope, you got to grab this one. And I get a little offended being told what to do, but then I realize that those are the ones they've wiped down. And to me, that type of visible efforts makes me assured. If your employees are wearing face masks, that tells me you care about beyond just what the municipality is recommending where you are or requiring. But if everybody's wearing a face mask, wearing it appropriately, covering nose and mouth, not hanging down here, that tells me as a customer that you're serious about keeping me safe in your business. So temperature checks would be, it could be, you could do that, but again, I think it's probably more effective to just remind people if they're sick to stay home.
To stay home. Great. Well, we got time for one last question, and I think I'll end it with the question that's on everyone's mind that was shared. Any idea on the timing and rollout plan for vaccinations?
That was our big announcement this morning on Facebook Live, and the answer is we don't know. All right. So Advent Health has been identified by the state as one of the organizations that's going to be storing, distributing, figuring out how to immunize our community. So we're one of several organizations, but we don't have any details yet. We don't know which vaccine. Neither vaccine that has been announced has been FDA approved for emergency use yet. We anticipate that'll come shortly, but I'll tell you what, our organization is cranking up, and there are meetings like crazy right now to try to figure out how we're going to mobilize our logistics around this. So it'll come soon. But I just want to point out one thing that there's questions that people go, well, I don't know about getting a vaccine, and is it safe, and that type of thing, and it seems like they're rushing this. One thing to think about is that the reason that we're able to get information in the phase 3 trials so early is because there is so much virus out there. In a phase 3 trial, we give volunteers the vaccine and see how effective it is. So it's like, go live your normal life, and we'll see if it prevents COVID-19. Well, when you live in a community where we have a widespread outbreak of COVID-19, there are a lot of people out there. We get information a lot faster now. So that's why there's all of a sudden saying, hey, we've got 2 vaccines. That doesn't mean anybody's rushed anything, but just because it's easier to do the phase 3 surveillance, when there's a lot of people that are sick with COVID-19 around you. We know how effective it is at preventing transmission. So
Yeah.
just keep that in mind. I'm a big proponent of the vaccines. I'll be first in line when my ticket comes up, depending on priority. We're looking at healthcare workers, frontline healthcare workers, and the ER, first responders, et cetera, which will be the first ones. But this is just 2 vaccines that we're talking about, and several months more of other vaccines coming out. So there's going to be more information and more coming out. So it's going to take a few months to get through this, but it's exciting to me. Very exciting information.
Yeah, thank you so much for that insight. Thank you so much for joining us today. Incredible information. I don't have my own business, but as a mom and someone that's trying to navigate work and school, I took great notes. So I appreciate you being here with us today and entertaining us with a list of questions. So thank you.
Right.
And if Dr. Hendricks won't be with us through the entire webinar today, but if you're like me and you get to end of this thing and you have that aha, I forgot to ask a question, please still share your question in our chat box, and we will be sure to get those questions over to you, Dr. Hendricks, and get the answers and share them with those that attended today. So on behalf of the Chamber, thank you.
You're welcome. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right, well, we're going to keep this amazing panel train keep going. And next up, we have Josh Field. Josh Field is a seasoned and accomplished strategic marketer, branding expert, and communication specialist who, prior to moving to Central Florida to pursue an entrepreneurial dream, he managed multi-million-dollar consumer brands as an executive with Ralston Purina, Coca-Cola, and Mary Kay. After almost 2 decades of climbing the corporate ladder at these multi-billion-dollar global companies, Josh took a senior level position at a series of smaller international organizations. And in 2006, Josh founded Space Coast Business LLC in Melbourne, Florida, where he adopted innovative approach to helping primarily second stage businesses achieve their marketing and communications objectives through a proprietary offering of print and digital media marketing products, marketing services, content development, and businesses. In 2016, Josh sold the business to pursue new opportunities and move closer to his family right here in Orlando. He purchased what he now owns, Alpha Graphics, a franchise in Lake Mary, Florida. As an entrepreneur, Josh has received numerous awards and recognition, including Business of the Year by the Cocoa Beach Chamber of Commerce, Entrepreneur of the Year by the Melbourne Palm Bay Area Chamber of Commerce, and Business of the Year by the Melbourne Regional Chamber of East Central Florida. We are honored and thankful to have you today here, Josh, and I will give you the floor. As a reminder, think of your questions, post them in the chat, and following Josh's presentation, we will give time for Q&A.
Well, thanks, Candace, and good morning, everyone. I'd like to start off by congratulating you for being on this call. First, because it means you care about your business. And next slide, please. As Woody Allen said, 80% of success is just showing up, and you all chose to show up and engage with us this morning. So if your business is like mine, this has been a pretty miserable year, and we're looking forward to putting as much of this behind us and moving on. But we can't erase the past, so I thought it might be helpful to do a quick summary of what's transpired over the past 9 to 10 months. Sadly, we've seen a lot of large national companies file for bankruptcy or shut their doors. And for every JCPenney, Gold's Gym, and Sizzler Steakhouse, there are thousands of small mom and pop businesses that have permanently closed. Next slide, please. According to Yelp, 60% of the businesses that closed during the early lockdown of the pandemic have closed permanently. That's over 100,000 businesses and millions of workers nationwide. When you consider that small businesses employ nearly 1/2 of the total private sector workforce, you can really start to get a sense for the scale of what's going on around the country. Even if you're not one of those businesses that had to shut their doors, small businesses across the country still saw their revenues decline, on average by 20 to 25%. Worse yet, if you work in the leisure and hospitality sectors, your revenue was down almost 50% in 2020. I think I read something recently that the Disney theme park division alone has lost close to $9 billion since the park shut down in March. So here in Central Florida, where many businesses rely on the tourism and convention industries, our economy and our workforce has suffered, and the trickle down of these job losses, revenue decreases, and the loss of the tax base affects all of us. So what do we do? Next slide, please. So I wrote a blog back in August, and you can read it on the Alpha Graphics Lake Mary website, where I talked about where we'd been with the pandemic at that point and where we're going. So honestly, I don't really think that much has changed since then, except for the divisiveness of this election season and the additional stress and anxiety that it's caused on top of this pandemic. So think about your business going forward compared to where it was, say, 10 to 11 months ago. I said in my blog then, if you think everything will return to normal once this pandemic is over, then your challenge is really just figuring out how to ride this out until everyone gets vaccinated and COVID goes away. However, it's my belief that how we do business has changed forever for many sectors in our economy. From business travel to entertainment, dining, shopping, and exercising, life is different, and we may never go back to how it was pre-COVID. So with that being said, you need to look hard at your business model and determine if it's still relevant and viable. If it's not, you better adapt, shift, or pivot before you become the next Steinmart or Hertz Rent-A-Car. Next slide, please. So the Chamber asked me to speak about the recovery process, specifically targeted reopening, workforce planning, and customer acquisition. So let's get started. Next slide, please. When we talk about reopening, that has different meaning depending on what you've been doing and how your business has been operating for the past 9 months. But here are some things to think about. If you've been working from home or have had certain members of your team working remotely, you must consider if and when it's time to go back to the office. Do you bring everybody back at once, do it in phases, or just have everyone stay at home and work remotely? What we're hearing is that many of the larger companies aren't planning to start bringing employees back until sometime in the second quarter, while others, like Veritas Recruiting up here in Seminole County, are canceling their commercial leases and going 100% virtual. Let me talk now about managing costs. Any business owner you talk to will tell you cash is king and conserve your cash. But you don't want to hold too much cash that you're hindering your ability to generate revenue. I've seen this time and again, especially during the recession in 2008, where businesses cut their marketing, they let go of salespeople, and then they wondered why they have no business. Conversely, I had clients who maintained their marketing presence and actually grew their market share exponentially during the recovery because their competitors cut all their marketing expenditures and their customers figured they had gone out of business. Regardless of the circumstances, you must maintain some baseline level of brand awareness with your customers, otherwise they will forget about you. Another way to manage your costs is to consider new vendors. Remember, your vendors have the same challenges that you do. They're trying to conserve cash and manage their costs. So in today's new normal, you may need to find new vendors who are just easier to do business with. For example, they may offer online ordering or free delivery. Maybe they offer you better payment terms. I mean, look at what Amazon has done to shopping malls. They've forever changed the shopping paradigm for millions of consumers. And before I get off the topic of managing your finances, try to leverage local funding programs. If there's any stimulus money left on the table, go for it. The current Fed administration may not put another stimulus package out anytime soon, but there still may be grants and loans available from other sources. Check the Chamber, BBIF, SBA, and your county to see if you can qualify for money to assist you with operations and payroll. Now let's talk for a minute about risk management. Ask yourself the tough what if questions and try to determine the likelihood for certain scenarios and how you'll act. And notice I said act, not react, because if you will make better decisions if you think through an issue before it happens rather than while it's happening. For example, talking a little bit about what Dr. Hendricks said, what will you do if you reopen your office and someone tests positive for COVID? Have a plan. How much cash do you have on hand, and how long will it last if your revenues continue to track at or below your current run rate? And what will you do when the cash runs out? As someone who's consulted with hundreds of businesses over the last 2 to 3 decades, I always recommend that business owners revisit their business model annually, and especially this year. Remember the 4 Ps from your marketing class in college? Product, place, price, and promotion. Look at your product, who you sell it to, how you deliver it, and the value it represents. Ask yourself, is it still relevant? How does it need to change? As an example, look at the restaurants that are doing well compared to those that have closed. What did they do to their business model? Did they embrace takeout and delivery? Did they create a new outdoor dining experience? Do they offer easy online ordering? Think about the challenge facing certain industries even after COVID goes away. As consumers, we have a much better understanding now on the transfer of bacteria and illnesses and the precautions necessary to make you feel safe. I mean, is anyone not going to have a bottle of hand sanitizer on their desk or in their car ever again? I know I'm not. You think there's going to be a mad dash to go on a cruise ship again anytime soon, or maybe ever again? Next slide, please. Okay, so let's just talk briefly on workforce planning, because I believe some of the other speakers will touch on this subject in greater detail. First thing you need to do is carefully assess your staffing needs. These are difficult decisions, and we've seen some pretty massive reductions in force recently by local companies like Disney and Rosen Hotels. Look at your personnel expenses relative to revenue. For most small businesses, personnel is your largest expense item. Between wages, bonuses, benefits, and taxes, people can be expensive, but oftentimes your people are your business. My revenue is down 40% this year, but I vowed to keep my team intact because I believe the value we provide our customers is derived by our people more than anything else. Other than having to shut down temporarily in April, I was able to retain all my employees at their full pay throughout this pandemic. And again, I'll remind you, try not to cut those expenses that generate revenue. I think one of the biggest concerns for your employees, as well as your customers and your vendors going forward, is going to be safety. Is your company a safe place to work and a safe organization to do business with? If you own a business, have you updated your employee handbook to include safety guidelines that adhere to the CDC, Department of Health, and OSHA? Are you providing personal protective equipment, encouraging hand washing, mask wearing, and social distancing? Again, all of the items that Dr. Hendricks talked about in the earlier session. Are you regularly cleaning and disinfecting your office? And I know that some of these safety precautions have become politicized, but I encourage you as business owners not to let this happen inside your business. The last thing I want to mention about the workforce is being aware of the psychological issues that your employees may be facing. Let's face it, these are some crazy times and people act differently. These issues include anxiety, stress, isolation, depression, sleeplessness, financial pressure, marital struggles, addiction, and even suicidal thoughts. I like to think of my staff as my team or my work family. I want my business to be a place where they feel safe and an escape for 8 hours a day from whatever pressures they may face outside of these walls. Talk about your mission, your why, your reason for being, and keep your team culture strong and focused. As a leader, your employees look to you for strength, vision, and security. So reassure them, listen to them, and show some empathy. Next slide, please. The last thing I want to talk about is customer acquisition. As Candace told you, I've been doing this a long time, and I'm an old school strategist who takes a pretty pragmatic approach to problem solving. I find myself constantly reminding my customers and my staff not to let the tail wag the dog. In other words, not to let tactics or actions dictate strategies and goals. I love when someone on my team comes to me with a suggestion or a creative idea, but I always ask them, what's the purpose? What are you trying to accomplish? How will you know if your idea is successful? Does this address the key goals of our organization? It's already mid-November, so hopefully you're working on or actually close to finishing your business plan, whether it's a reopening plan or your 2021 marketing plan. So here are some steps I think you need to take. First of all, define or redefine your targets. We break our audience down into 3 buckets. Our current customers, our lost or our old customers, and our new or prospective customers. Segment your audience and then ask yourself, what do they buy? What do they need? What is their pain? What is the problem that they have that you can solve for them? I hate to tell you this, but 99% of all your businesses are commodities. There's someone out there that does what you do and is waiting to replace you when you screw up. In this pandemic environment, you need to know what your competitors are doing in order for you to survive. Have they cut prices to be more competitive? Have they ramped up their marketing? Are they targeting your top customers? Have they shut down completely or just downsized their staff? The more you know about the external variables that you can't control that affect your business, the better decisions you can make regarding the internal variables that you can control. Next, start by setting realistic goals. You don't get in a car and start driving if you don't have a destination in mind and you don't have directions to get there. Same is true with your business. If your business was down 20 to 30% this year, is it realistic to expect revenues to bounce back to pre-COVID levels in 2021? So make sure your goals are realistic, tangible, measurable. Write them down and track your results against them at least every 30 days. Your goals tell you what you want to happen within a certain time period. For now, I'm recommending you set quarterly, 6-month, and annual goals. Your strategies define how you will achieve those goals. Let's take an example. Suppose one of your overall goals for next year is to increase your revenue by 25% over 2020. How will you accomplish this? You may determine that there are 3 paths or strategies to achieving this singular goal. 1 is by upselling your current customers by introducing a new service or product line. 2 is retaining 20% of your old customers who haven't ordered in over a year by providing a lucrative incentive for their first order. And 3, adding 10 new customers a month through an aggressive advertising campaign. Notice that when I stated my strategies, I didn't say what new product or service I would be adding, nor did I mention specifics of the retention promotion or the details of my advertising campaign. It's not until you've defined the hows that you should even start evaluating tactics to execute each strategy. So now let's move into tactics. The best marketing plans integrate numerous elements to engage with your target audience as they travel down their unique journey to purchase. Depending on the complexity and timing of your sales cycle, it may take numerous interventions with a prospect before they're ready to buy anything from you. In fact, most new customers now require 8 to 12 interventions before a sale can happen. The challenge is to get your brand noticed, so when the timing is right and the need arrives for whatever product or service you provide, you're the one who gets the call. Because every consumer receives information differently, We recommend a balanced, integrated plan that incorporates traditional and digital tactics. From your signage to your email signature, your website to your advertising, your business to collateral to how you answer the phone, the events you attend to the organizations you support, every opportunity to engage with a customer or a prospect needs to be consistent and aligned with the goals and strategies you set forth in your business plan. Track your results, tweak the verbiage and the vehicles that deliver the message, stay consistent, and be present. Remember, 80% of success is just showing up. So thanks for showing up today, and good luck with your reopening and your plans for 2021. Candace, if we have questions, I'd be happy to answer them now.
Thank you so much, Josh. Amazing presentation, great information, and some tangible takeaways. As a reminder, you can post any questions in the chat so that we can use this time to get Josh's feedback. One follow-up question I had, and this is just to help those that may be familiar, may not be familiar, but you mentioned access to capital. I mean, when you're looking at really trying to pivot and prepare yourself to open through the midst of COVID, you suggested tapping into any of the COVID care funds that may be available. But then you also shared, contact organizations such as BBIF. Now, I'm very familiar with BBIF as a CDFI, but everyone on the call may not be familiar with organizations like BBIF and the role that they play around access to capital. Could you really expand around those type of organizations like a BBIF that works differently than, say, a traditional bank like Wells Fargo?
Actually, my knowledge of BBIF comes from one of my employees who's married to one of their employees. So we know Jasmine Gabon very well, and the wonderful work that organization is doing. I know that they primarily got started focusing on African-American owned businesses, but have expanded since then. Unfortunately, what we've seen is that African-American businesses did not have the same access to these types of grants and loans that non-African-American businesses did. So you've got to be creative. And fortunately, there are organizations out there that are working with these entrepreneurs that may not have had access through traditional banking channels. I mean, even myself, we originally started with a large bank like Wells Fargo. We couldn't get PPP money. Actually had to go find a small local bank in order to get it. We were very lucky. But yeah, you've got to be creative. You've got to have your ear to the ground. You've got to have some contacts, and there's nothing wrong with asking for help. I think a lot of business owners are trying to do it all themselves, and this is the time where you have to drop your ego a little bit and ask for help.
Yeah, great point. And so when you talk about also asking for help, another follow-up question, because Dr. Hendricks mentioned it, part of a plan and being able to really reopen and move through COVID-19 is having a strong return to policy work, return to work policy, if you will. And then you mentioned also updates to the employee handbook. And so for businesses who may not have, the HR department like a big corporation where HR is already adapted all of those amendments to our policies and our return to work and our time away. Like it just happens naturally in a big organization. But for smaller businesses who need to probably do some tweaks to their policies, are you familiar with any resources that small businesses could use to leverage to make that a little bit easier to navigate through?
We do our payroll with Paychex, and Paychex has a great HR division that they offer to all their businesses. So things like policies, hiring, employee handbooks, they're a great resource for us. That's who we've used. But again, you got to remember too that the majority of small businesses are small. They're less than 100 employees. A lot of them are less than 10 employees. So oftentimes you can just sit around and have a meeting and say, this is what we're going to do. It's great to put it in writing. We have an employee handbook. I think I update it once a year, and I don't know that anybody reads it. When I worked in corporate America, you got a handbook on your first day on the job, and then you never saw it again.
Mhm.
So, there's the communication that you have to make as a business owner or as a manager to ensure that your employees, know what's expected of them, and if there are policy changes, specifically as it comes to safety. Sometimes just a poster hanging, by the coffee pot is adequate.
Yeah, but you give a really great tip is, if you're a small business owner and you have a company that's processing your payroll, they probably have already provided, resources and guides and references that they're allowing their clients to use. And so that just may be a starting place as well. It goes back to your initial point of, just being willing to ask the questions and ask for help and not recreating the wheel around some of these things. So that's a great starting place right there as well.
The other place you can check is if you are if you do own a franchise, your franchisor may have those types of things available to you as well.
Great, nice. We do have a question here. It says, what if COVID came to stay here forever as a reoccurring disease? Let's not put that in the atmosphere, but what if? What would be your advice?
Well, I'm not a doctor, but I'd probably move to New Zealand or something like that first. I guess realistically, whether it's COVID or it's, COVID-19 or COVID-20 or whatever's coming down the road, I think this was a wake-up call to be aware. Like I said, I don't think business is going to go back to what it was pre-COVID. We've learned lessons about safety. We've learned lessons about the transmission of disease. And those are going to change the way we do business. I hate to see everything go online, but the reality is if you've walked through a mall recently, nobody's shopping. Or should I say, no one's shopping in a store anymore. Everyone's buying online. You need to have a presence where people can easily buy from you. Our business, everything we do is custom made. We don't stock items. So we have to interact with our customers, but we do a lot through email. We do a lot now through these types of Zoom chats. We still offer the opportunity to come in and meet one-on-one, but now we're social distancing. We're wearing masks. We're having hand sanitizers. You've got to adapt. You've got to figure out how to make it work. And you've got to make it work for your customers, or they're going to find some other alternative.
Yeah. So staying flexible, realizing that the decisions you make right now may look totally different in the decisions you make next summer. So being able to stay able to pivot and flexible and as proactive to it as you can be.
Candace, I think anyone that owns a small business knew that before COVID ever hit.
Mm-hmm.
I've worked on both sides. I've worked for corporate America, and I've seen how slow it is to change. It's like the old steering a battleship. Whereas when you have a small business, you make a decision today, you execute tomorrow. So the best small businesses, the best entrepreneurs are the people that have been adapting and pivoting throughout their careers. This is
right.
just
keep that same entrepreneurial spirit.
Yeah, this is just another hurdle in a marathon run.
Love it. Well, thank you so much, Josh, for your time today and some strong takeaways for our entrepreneurs on this call today and those that may listen afterwards to put into play. We really do appreciate, once again, if there are any questions that come up, for Josh or Dr. Hendricks, continue to post those. We will combine them and make sure that we get them answered from Josh and Dr. Hendricks and send those responses out to you guys. So on behalf of the chamber, Josh, thank you so much this morning.
Great. Thanks, Candace. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right, gang. So next up, last but definitely not least, we have with us Tim Bolding. Tim joined Orange County in 1989 as a planner in County Planning Division and moved to the Zoning Division in 1991 as a chief planner and ultimately became assistant manager in 2000. During his time in the Zoning Division, he led the efforts to develop the county's one-stop permitting services along with permitting related technology programs. After a short period of being interim manager of the Zoning Division in 2012, he went on to serve as the Division of Building Safety Manager and guided the division out of the recession and implemented customer service metric analytics for the division. In 2015, he was promoted to Deputy Director, Planning, Environmental, and Development Services Department, overseeing the permitting services of both the zoning and building safety divisions. In addition to those duties, he also currently serves as the interim manager of the county's code enforcement division, whose staff also leads the county strike teams during the ongoing pandemic. Welcome, Tim. As a reminder, we'll do the same. We'll have questions for Tim following his presentation. So Tim, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Candace, and good morning. Wow, some great information from Dr. Hendricks on the factual aspects of this virus, and Josh did a great job in outlining some of the challenges for small businesses as they kind of navigate what we're going through. You know, Josh brought up a lot of good points, and certainly from our standpoint in Orange County, being a tourist kind of capital here in Florida with the theme parks that we have and so forth, it's important for us that that our businesses are up and running. Tourism is a big revenue driver for our economy here, so we take a keen interest in making sure that businesses are able to function and work through this through these trying times and so forth. So back in March, you know, when we first saw this pandemic start to kind of infiltrate into our communities and so forth, one of the things that obviously a lot of businesses and of course Orange County looked at was to how do we best continue operations effectively and efficiently, making sure that customers are able to be served, and we're able to continue to keep permitting activities and development activities going, and along with all the other businesses that are out there. So when it appeared that the virus was kind of taking hold, and the numbers started to spike a little bit, Orange County kind of had a economic recovery task force to kind of look at how we can manage not only just Orange County's business, but what it is that we could do for the businesses themselves, that and the challenges that were ahead. So when it appeared that the numbers were kind of spiking, and ultimately a lot of counties outside of Orange as well decided that they would do some curfews to kind of try to keep people in place and from congregating too much. A lot of businesses started looking at teleworking their employees. Orange County did the same thing. So I think we're running about 60% of our staff is now telecommuting from home, which allows to keep some social distancing within the business itself. So when we're looking at the some of these things starting to happen, ultimately we wound up coming to a shutdown, which was devastating to a lot of businesses. And I think Mayor Demings understands that that aspect of it at the time, that this was a critical decision that that was being made, and certainly would have some impacts on especially the small businesses with regard to moving forward, in order to try and figure out a way to kind of keep this virus and these numbers in check. So once that once the shutdown happened, certainly the Economic Recovery Task Force started looking at how is it that we can start reopening our economy and our businesses safely, not only to the businesses themselves, but to the patrons that that would visit those businesses. So the mayor obviously looked at how we can best start doing that. The theme parks were kind of on a separate track, where they were looked at as, from the state standpoint, providing a reopening plan. What were the theme parks going to do? The Universal, SeaWorld, the Disneys, and some of the other smaller parks out there. How were they going to be able to reopen up? And they were going to be required to provide a reopening plan that would have to be approved by not only the county, but through the state as well. They started providing some of those documentations and outlined the safety precautions of what they were doing. And as part of that, the county also looked at how we could help businesses along the way navigate this kind of period, and hopefully encourage and educate as well. So we looked at what we started here with the mayor's initiative was a business compliance assistance team. Once the rules were kind of in place with reopening, I think we started as a phase 1, 25%, phase 2, 50%, and then phase 3, somewhere down the line, was going to be 100%. But certainly after a shutdown, you're looking at that first initial 25% opening for restaurants and retail places. And because of that, we also instituted in Orange County, and this isn't everywhere, but the mayor felt that this was an important aspect of being able to reopen businesses here, was to have a mask mandate in order to keep the virus from spreading and doing more than what it needed to be doing. So with the mask mandate in place, this allowed the ability of what we wound up looking at is strike teams. The mayor's had his executive order, which required signage for wearing of masks, the face covering in itself, social distancing, making sure that you have 6-foot spacing between tables, or if you're having a queue, that you have 6-foot spacing in the queue, and that you have some hand sanitization stations, if in a restaurant, that they be on all the tables. So we have an executive order that went out there that outlined these type of things, and we wanted to make sure that that businesses were complying with it. And the mayor felt that it was incumbent upon the businesses and the patrons to follow those mandates, and of course the CDC guidelines and protocols. So he had a lot of faith in those people to make sure that they want to make sure that their place is safe and healthy, for not only for their employees and staff, but for the patrons that are visiting those particular establishments. So we started a strike teams to kind of go out and make sure that businesses were complying with the orders. You know, there's sometimes there tends to be a lot of misinformation that's out there, and one of our goals was to ensure that there was compliance with not only the executive order and the mandates within that, but also that that they provide some sort of guidance with regard to the CDC guidelines and protocols. So because there was no penalties established for that, I understand that some other locations may have wanted to impose a fine or some other sort of penalty. The mayor decided that he did not feel that that was something that he wanted to pursue, and that we would leave it up to the businesses and the patrons to make sure that they would adhere to the guidelines. So as part of this, the mayor decided that he was going to provide for strike teams and or a business compliance assistant team. And what this was is the purpose was to ensure that the local businesses were adhering to not only the local executive orders regarding the pandemic, COVID pandemic, but they were there to investigate the businesses not following those executive orders and to help them, educate them, guide them, and possibly give them the tools and resources needed to do so. So we have a series of teams. We have 5 teams that are out every day, and those teams are made up of a code enforcement officer who is the lead of this team. We have a representative from the fire marshal's office and a representative from the state health department. So each one of those teams has those 3 representatives. And we felt that it provided a good cross-section of information and abilities for us to impart the information that we needed to provide to the businesses in order to operate effectively in this environment. So we have these 3 representatives. You have a code enforcement, and outside of being the lead role with their team, they're there to provide information as to why we are actually there for the inspection, and to go to those areas that we consider to be kind of the hot spots through tracing of the zip codes of where people had tested positive. And then, of course, they're also looking to make sure that the businesses were adhering to the executive orders, and making sure that the servers and patrons and staff have the signage up in their window that masks are required, making sure that you're keeping social distance, whether it's tables from each other, whether it's lines in a queue that you have. They wanted to make sure that they provide that. And then also looking to make sure that if you could follow certain CDC guidelines, such as taking a temperature check for those entering into your store, that's always a good way to catch those that may be asymptomatic and not really realize that they could be carrying that virus. So they were kind of the lead. They're the instructors of these teams that go out there. And then we also have the health department, and they their basic job out there in when they go into a business is their observation of the public and the employees, making sure that the masks are being worn. Following up and making sure with regard to, are they displaying the best hygienic practices out there with regard to sanitization, whether it's wiping down touch spots that are frequently touched, whether it's a hand railing or doorknobs and those kind of things, anything that they could do to kind of disinfect and keep the virus at bay. They're looking for that, and they also provide good information with regard to hygiene and making sure that business, especially in restaurants where there's food being served by servers and cooks, and what's the best way to make sure that that you're keeping your place clean and disinfected. And then also, you also have the fire marshal's office, who is looking at in the early parts of our initial visits, were to look at making sure that they adhere to the occupancy loads, whether it's 25%, whether it's 50%, and then of course certainly if it's 100%, just making sure that they somehow can maintain some social distancing and making sure that there's ingress and egress available. Certainly having multiple ingress and egress for them is optimal, especially if you can have people coming in one direction and exiting out another direction. That's always helpful. And then also they were able to provide any kind of PPE supplies. One of the things we did with our strike teams when we're out there, especially during the early portions of the pandemic, it was extremely difficult to obtain and secure supplies such as masks, gloves, and hand sanitizers. And certainly government offices had the ability to kind of procure a lot of these types of things, use the power of the government to kind of procure some of these things. So when we were out there and visiting some of these businesses, if we notice that they're not adhering or don't have the ability to adhere, maybe they didn't have masks, or maybe they didn't have hand sanitizers, gloves, if you're working in a restaurant kind of thing. We provided each of our strike teams with those types of supplies. So when they were there and doing their visitation and inspection, if they were in need of those types of supplies, we were able to provide some of those supplies, and especially if it helped them to get in compliance with the regulations. So those are one of the things that we had. And we also had flyers made up, whether it would be the signage for the requirement of the mask. One of the things that we've always told the businesses, especially those that didn't want to put up a sign for fear of the reaction they might have get. Our signs had the Orange County logo on it, and it was an Orange County mandate. So we were more than willing to have you put that up there and make us the, if you want to call it, the bad guy, so to speak, with regard to why we would want the face coverings before we enter the premises. We were willing to do that. And certainly we also had flyers that we handed out, best practices with regard to keeping your safe and patrons safe and hygienically clean throughout the restaurant. So there was a lot of information that goes out to them, a lot of supplies that we were able to, especially early on. And now that we've kind of come through this several months later, a lot of these supplies have started to catch up, where people can start ordering those. So the requirement has kind of gone down a little bit, but every once in a while we see a business here and there that may need those types of supplies. So we're more than willing to provide that for them. So from the standpoint of what our strike teams do, we have 5 teams that are out there. They visit in Orange County. We estimate approximately over 20-some thousand businesses that we have in Orange County. We roughly think that maybe 8,000 to 10,000 of those would be home-based businesses, which we would not be visiting since they're home-based in a residential environment. We're concentrating more on the commercial environment aspects. So we got about 10,000 businesses that we may be looking at, and certainly there may be a few that may be out of business even before the pandemic. We used the the census data to kind of gather up the type of businesses that we have here. And so when we kind of got an idea of the businesses, we created a dashboard for that allowed us to be able to track once we visit a business, whether you were in compliance or not in compliance, the reasons that you may not have been in compliance, and then the percentages of businesses that are in compliance. Overall, to this date, we have visited over 5,000 of the county businesses, and that includes the municipalities that are within the county. And we have an overall compliance rate of about 96% from that standpoint. So we've done a really good job of doing that. What winds up happening is we'll send out our business, usually about 15 to 20 businesses for each team. They may not get to all of them in a day. We do on average, about 60 businesses a day. If you're non-compliant, we hand you a letter that basically indicates the reasoning for the non-compliance, and then we put you back in the queue for a follow-up visit somewhere down the road. All of our visits are unannounced for the reasons probably well known, and in that we want to make sure that we capture the true aspects of what the business is going through, and to make sure that the patrons that are visiting the business know that the business is adhering to the protocols and guidelines and the executive orders that are out there. So with that, we've done over 5,000. We've visited many a second time that are in compliance, or that weren't in compliance, that wind up coming in compliance. And certainly we've kind of gone on down the line. Anytime you're not compliant, we wind up revisiting. And we've also included in that the theme parks, and the theme parks have done a really good job in terms of prior to this all happening, them having a reopening plan, which basically is a detailed plan of where their signage was going to be, that the fact that they would require all staff and all patrons to wear masks. They also included areas where you could have a mask relaxation area, that you could do that. And then certainly if you're eating, certainly you wouldn't require a mask to be eating, but certainly if you were not, they were looking to do that. And then hand sanitization stations located throughout the parks and the areas to make sure that people have access to that, because certainly there's a lot of touching and that goes on in certain areas, and so disinfecting was also a key aspect of making sure that that we did that as well. So from that standpoint, our mission is continuing to go out there. We're out there every day, Monday through Friday. And we've also instituted recently going out on weekends to check businesses along those lines. And for the most part, we have found that businesses are extremely receptive to us being there. They appreciate the advice, the encouragement, and the education that we can provide to them as well. And hopefully we'll continue to keep doing that. We just this past weekend actually did a nighttime aspect of our visit to nightclubs and bars. And since the reopening, especially at 100%, there is extreme difficulty for a lot of these types of establishments to maintain social distancing, have wearing of masks, and so forth. So that's a challenge that we have ahead of us in how we can make sure that people adhere to the guidelines as much as possible to try and, especially when you're congregating a lot of people in small places that may not have the ventilation that they're looking for, and certainly that's a challenge that we have. So we've been out this past weekend to those nightclubs, and we're doing some outreach efforts for them to see if we can't help them try to get compliance. The majority of where we go is proactive, meaning we're taking it off the list of business that we are on there, and we have certain zones that each of the teams that are covering, and they're going to those, and probably about 6 or 7% of those that we get are complaint driven, and we certainly put those on the list as soon as we get them, and usually they're out the next day checking those places out as well. So the mayor is very happy with how this is going. Certainly, we want to continue to keep moving forward in helping businesses along the way. I know it's been a struggle out there for a lot of businesses, especially in the early time, and certainly now that we're up and running a little bit, and in the state of Florida at 100% capacity. This is a critical time for a lot of businesses, and we certainly want to be a partner in trying to help businesses survive through this aspect, and in any way possible that we can do that, we're looking to help try and do that. And with Candace, with that, I think we're pretty much squared away with the code enforcement and the business compliance, and be happy to take any questions that anybody has with regard to that.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tim, for walking us through that process, like how it was very interesting for me to really understand, the method to the why and the how, and how you guys are approaching it. And it really helps to really understand that the whole essence is not a gotcha, but really to support the businesses in our community through this. So, just hats off to Orange County and y'all's leadership there. I do have one follow-up question. I know when you come that it's unannounced, right? Because you really want to see it in the essence of, just their day-to-day running the business. But is there a checklist that is out there that businesses could see? Here are the things that it takes to be running a business to be compliant. So at least they could be working on those things prior to having a visit, or do they get all that information at the visit itself?
Well, there is some information that we provide at the time, a small checklist. Certainly what we encourage people to do, only because sometimes it seems like it's changing a little bit, and every business is a little bit different. We ask them to go to the CDC website. They have a breakdown of a lot of different types of businesses, what would be good, hygienic practices, protocols, and guidelines. Each one is a little bit just. Certainly restaurants would have one certain criteria. Your gyms and exercise facilities might have some different criteria. So we encourage them to visit that website and go to their specific business type website to see what kind of guidelines are available to them.
Got it. Awesome. Thank you. A question here in queue, and we had a question to Dr. Hendricks just around the possibility of a vaccination coming soon, and I know that's on everyone's mind. So in this question is dealing with the vaccination is, at the point that a vaccination is released, and residents have an opportunity to take it, will Orange County consider big public gatherings again if proof of vaccination can be shown, or will they still reinforce mask wearing mandates?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question. I think we're we're a ways off with regard to the vaccine in terms of maybe early part of next year, and to the general public, maybe March, April, from what I'm hearing. So certainly, I think we'll be vigilant up until that point, and I think really it comes down to what the numbers start looking like. If it looks like the numbers are coming down, and everybody does what we hope that they would do, certainly I think the possibility is there that we can get to it. Certainly, look, the theme parks are open at about 100% right now. When you think about the Disneys, the Universal, SeaWorld, there's a lot of people that enter these parks, and one of the reasons they're having some success is the wearing of masks in those kind of things. Certainly, you don't want people congregated shoulder to shoulder like in a nightclub and kind of thing. I think that would be a different story altogether. But certainly, I think somewhere down the road we could see that happening. It's just not we're just not quite there yet.
Got it. Awesome. Thank you. And then one last question. You mentioned about the dashboard. I think it's impressive, and it just shows the strength of our small business community. But you shared about 96% of the businesses thus far have been compliant. For that 4%, is there a trend in what you guys are seeing in maybe the biggest obstacles or challenges with businesses being compliant?
I think you zeroed in on a good point there. Those businesses that we see have the toughest time, and I get why this is a tough time, is your fast in and out type places, such as your gas stations, your convenience stores. People think, I'm just going to be here for a minute. I'm going to run in. I'm going to get my stuff and get back out. Those are the ones that we're seeing are the toughest to comply, because people are on the go. They want to get in. They're close to the door. They forgot their mask in the car. They go in anyway because they're only going to be in there for a minute. And we see that those are the toughest ones. And we continue to keep working with them. That's going to be a struggle, because that's the quick in and outs that are the most difficult to get to adherence.
Yeah, I can see that. I've been guilty where I've been at the door.
Good pickup. That was a good question.
I go back, Tim. I go back every time, and and I grab. I can remember a time where we would run back to our car because we forgot our cell phone. And now we're running back to our car because we forgot our mask. That's just 2020 in a nutshell, right? Well, Tim, let me make sure no other questions. Those are the two that we had. Very thorough presentation. Thank you so much. I think you give a little bit of peace to the businesses that if the strike team shows up at your business next week, they're ultimately there to help you. And so thank you for joining on behalf of the team. We truly do appreciate it. If something comes to mind, I know Tim's going to leave us for this moment, but if something comes to mind, please don't hesitate to put those questions or comments in the box, and we'll share them with him and his team and get the answers for you.
Thank you so much, Candace.
Thank you so much, Tim. You have an amazing day. To all of our panelists, we know that all of them had tight schedules and other engagements they had to go to. But on behalf of the African American Central Florida Chamber and Wells Fargo, to Dr. Hendricks, to Josh, and to Tim, thank you for taking this time to be with us this morning. To all of you who took the time to invest in not only yourself as an entrepreneur to help build better businesses through the midst of COVID, thank you, because you could be somewhere else this morning, but you're taking the time to be here today to make sure that you get the tools and resources that you need. I want to invite you and encourage you to join us for our final episode of our 3-part boot camp series that will be on December 10th. It is Restore. This will give you an opportunity to hear from an amazing list of panelists that will talk about restoration strategy, long-term access to capital, and networking opportunities. And this will bring together our full 3-part boot camp series. On behalf of Tanisha and the Chamber and your leadership, thank you for being an amazing partner here in Central Florida and continuing to be in this fight with our small business community. in Orlando. And so with that, Tanisha, I turn it back over to you.
Wow, thank you so much, Candace, for serving as our moderator for part 2 of our 3-part boot camp. And thank you to Wells Fargo for sponsoring the boot camp and being a trustee member of our chamber. Also would like to join Candace in thanking our 3 panelists, Dr. Hendricks, with all of the valuable information he shared, not only that we can use in our businesses, but in our personal lives, and Dr. Hendricks, as well as Advent Health, the trustee member of the chamber. Joss Fields with Alpha Graphics, they also are a member of our chamber and provide a lot of our chamber needs, as well as Tim with the county, and we thank them for their support and partnership with our chamber. So thank you all for joining. Just a few comments before we close out. If you are interested in becoming a member of our chamber, please visit our website at blackcommerce.org, where you can sign up for to become a member. You will see all of our different membership opportunities as well as levels. So we invite you, if you are not a member, to please go to our website to find more information. Next slide, please. Also, we encourage you to follow us on social media so that you can find out more about which webinars we have coming up and other things we have to offer. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, as well as LinkedIn. And we also have a YouTube page that you can go and see previous webinars. Look at our website. We've just refreshed it. Again, that's blackcommerce.org, and you can find out more about updates and what we're doing. And an added value we have is called Member Voices. You can hear straight from some of our members about what they've been up to, their businesses, as well as you can check out some hot deals, which we're all looking forward to with the holidays. Speaking of hot deals, we're going right into it. Please follow us on social media and look at our upcoming newsletters, where we will talk about some of our hot deals from our chamber members. Now more than ever, it's important to support small businesses, and we are encouraging you to shop local and eat local and join us in supporting our members with these hot deals. We also have a few other things we like to point out, but membership has its privileges. You must be a member of our chamber to apply for the AT&T grant. You must apply now. The deadline is coming up on November 23rd. We partnered with our chamber member AT&T, where they will be assisting us in giving out 3 grants in the amount of $5,000 each to a chamber member. So again, the deadline is November 23rd. You must be a member of our chamber. Visit our website at blackcommerce.org to apply. And then we also have another opportunity with our trustee member, Florida Technical College. We partner with them to offer 1 full-year scholarship for a business degree. So we encourage you to follow our website, go to our website, www.blackcommerce.org, and apply by November the 30th for this scholarship opportunity. We thank our trustee member, Florida Technical College, for partnering with us for this. Again, thank you all so much for joining us. We encourage you to be safe, keep in contact with us. If you'd like to reach our chamber, please email us at info@blackcommerce.org. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.